So I'm just going to summarize. I'm going to talk about a few things that I've been talking to lots of partners with and lots of customers with over the last few months. I'm going to summarize quite a few things that have been said today and just go over a few things. There's nothing going to be particularly revolutionary here. And it's only going to take a few minutes because I know that there's beer and wine and cocktails outside, and I really don't want to keep you from those for any longer than I have to. So we know all this is very common. All this data from every single industry out there is changing the world. And we know that this is going to be really, really key going forward for our businesses. We're now in what's called the zettabyte era. That started in around 2010, when the amount of data that traversed the internet in 1 year was over a zettabyte. And now in 2025, we are seeing huge amounts of data going over the internet. So first of all, just make sure you know, because all you guys are techie guys, so hopefully you know what a zettabyte is. So 1 zettabyte is equivalent to about 4 trillion iPhones. Yeah, of a standard iPhone. Yeah, equivalent to 30 billion 4K movies. It's an absolutely enormous amount of data. If you think of it from a megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte, petabyte, exabyte, zettabyte perspective, and I'm really glad I could remember that on the stage, it is a huge amount of data. And in 2018, around the world, in core and edge, we had about 33 zettabytes of data. Now, from an analogy perspective, think of that as an apple. Okay? Today, we have about 175 zettabytes of data around the world in core and edge. By 2030, we'll have 572 zettabytes of data around the world. So think from an analogy, think of a really big ball, one of those things that it's called zorbing, isn't it, where you run down a hill really fast in a ball. But by 2050, you're going to need a ball the size of Wembley Stadium to store the data in. Okay, 500,000 zettabytes of data. Huge exponential growth, and that's why this is so important now. As we saw a little earlier, and these numbers are slightly different from the ones that Dave mentioned earlier on. It's a slightly lower number, in fact, and this is a couple of years old. AWS, Microsoft, and Google have 72% of the cloud spend in Europe. That's a significant proportion of spend. And there's some estimations, about 90% of European data lives in American hyperscaler solutions and are therefore subject to the US Cloud Act and FISA 702, etc. So we've talked a lot about the lack of definition of a sovereign cloud. So here is one for you to have a little look at and think about. This is one that I've put together from a few other definitions that I found. But the key here for me is jurisdiction, the authority over the data. It is intended to ensure that data and infrastructure is free from control by external jurisdictions and protected from foreign government access. That is the key, I think, from a sovereign cloud. If you don't have authority, complete authority over that data, then is it really a sovereign cloud? And then why is this important? Because it protects and unlocks the value of the critical data. And we've heard that all day long from both a private and public sector perspective, national capability perspective, how compliance and data privacy laws work on a public cloud becomes really, really complicated, and then control becomes really, really complicated as well. So the two key points I want to make here as well, data residency and data sovereignty are not the same thing. Data residency, where the physical data lives, the spindles, the NAND modules, the SSDs, where they live in the data center, does not guarantee you sovereignty over that data. As we've heard a number of times today, foreign states, and particularly around the US and China, I'll give you an example in a moment, really potentially can have access to that data. And in most cases, that doesn't really, really matter, to be honest. But in some cases, it does matter. No one here wants to prevent law enforcement doing their job. No one wants to prevent drug traffickers being brought to book and facing justice. We all want the same things, but obviously we need to think about how we do those things as well. So to give you an example, imagine we're in France for a moment, okay? And in France, Microsoft come along and they build us a really nice new data center, multiple availability zones, a nice new data center. And then we come along and we put our data in that data center, okay? Now, we've got Alan Sugar here. That's the owner of the data, Okay, I know I've got a British entrepreneur and a French flag, but I tried to look up a French entrepreneur, but it appears they're all in jail. So I couldn't, so I couldn't find anyone. So I put Alan Sugar down because everyone knows who he is, and et cetera, et cetera. So we have Alan Sugar representing the owner of that data. Okay, his company's creating that data. We have Satya Nadella representing Microsoft. Emmanuel Macron representing the French government and all the French government agencies, intelligence directors. And then we have Donald Trump, okay, representing the United States, okay? Hands up, who thinks that Alan Sugar is the only one with authority over that data? Good, no hands went up. That means that you've been listening, okay, and you get to have a drink afterwards. That's great, okay? Yeah, because in different ways and shapes and forms, all of those people have some level of authority or control over that data, okay? So the data owner, Alan Sugar, really has to share that authority with Microsoft, with the French government, with the US government as well, okay? And I think it was Chris who mentioned this case a little earlier on. Chris from A&S talked about this. Microsoft spent a long time trying to woo sovereign cloud customers. They told you that their sovereign cloud was the best sovereign cloud and it had full control over the data. And then about 14 months later, they had to admit that they were lying. Okay, so this is a Scottish policing case where Microsoft had to admit to the lawyers that no, we can't guarantee sovereignty in that case. In that all of they don't have obviously private information, that police information, that potentially sort of criminal cases, etc. No, we can't guarantee that data only resides inside the UK. So sorry about that. We were wrong. So the three American considerations, and we've gone through these today. So the Cloud Act, I think we all sort of understand what that is and what it means, etc. We have the PRISM program that was leaked by Snowden in 2013. We talked about that. That isn't targeted at all. That's all data that goes through Google, Facebook, Microsoft, etc., Apple, etc., being filtered through the NSA's systems and their capabilities about monitoring that data and pulling data out of that. And then FISA 702, and this is the one that most people are concerned mostly about because it's done behind closed doors. The Cloud Act is reasonably public. It is, people have to be notified if their data is going to be accessed by federal government and agencies in the US. FISA, that's not the case. It's done behind complete, FISA courts are closed door courts, and it's done behind closed doors. So this is the one that most people raise a lot of concern about. And just not to be anti-American, because I don't want, I may have to go back to that country at some point, so I don't want to get blacklisted or be on a non-fly list to the US. China as well has similar legislation, which of course impacts Huawei and Alibaba Cloud and similar solutions. So this is my opinion, again, opinion piece here. Sovereignty has three tiers to it. There's the security tier. We're all really familiar with that. It's about all the standard security things that we do around data loss prevention, business continuity planning, security assessments, identity access, all of those usual things. There's the compliance, and that is the spider web of this, the complexity around all the different compliance, whether it's country-based compliance, EU-based compliance, or industry-specific compliance like DORA or PCI. And then you have the sovereignty element. And all of those components there are what makes up the sovereignty. So data residency, authority, controls, portability, etc. Those are what makes up, in my view at least, and again, we don't really have a definition of this, but from a sovereign platform, cloud, or AI, that's my view in what we need. So just from a sovereign AI, and we've just talked about this, so I won't drain these slides. There's a huge now amount of interest and discussion going on about this. Everyone is talking about sovereign AI, and it's inevitable. If sovereign cloud and sovereignty is about the data, then of course the next step in that discussion is around AI and how you use that data from a learning, from a outcome perspective. So there's no surprising element to that. And again, my view here, what makes sovereign in the AI context. And you can see here independence from individual providers, consideration of legal frameworks, compliance with the data protection transparency obligations, the EU Data Act, self-determination around the use of the models, etc. No unwanted use of the data of own data for training public AI models, etc. And I'm not here to do any type of sales pitch around, VMware or Broadcom, but really this is what VMware has been doing for the last 25 years, building platforms that are air-gapped where required, and non-connected where required, and build solutions around customer requirements. And just to build on that, you can see here the verticals and the horizontals. You've got the manageability, governance, security controls, the data, infrastructure, and operations. All aspects of data, infrastructure, and operations require sovereignty. And from a manageability perspective, governance, security, and a controls perspective. And again, I'm not here to do the sales pitch, so I'm not going to do it on again. Otherwise, I won't get a drink outside. So where's this important? Government, obviously. Healthcare, obviously. Banks and financial services, obviously. Critical national infrastructure, which is a very broad statement now, because after COVID, certainly in the UK, supermarkets are considered critical national infrastructure, and their supply chains are considered critical national infrastructure. So, that is quite a broad statement now around critical requirements around critical national infrastructure. So top secret research projects. I was in Oxford recently at the nuclear fusion plant there, where they're doing fusion reactors are being built and tested there. Some real proprietary technology being used there. Again, entirely stored on that site in Oxford. And then, of course, our personal data, our location, our photographs, our children's information, our banking information. Of course, it matters to us, and every one of us in this room has been impacted by our identity being stolen to some extent, or losing our data because some of our trusted, vendors, if you like, went a bit array and lost your data. So we can see that there is a need for sovereignty and sovereign cloud across Europe. From a geopolitical perspective, we've talked about all of these elements today around trade disputes, nationalism, Brexit, suspicion of big tech, the sensitivity of this data, the reliance on other countries and companies managing our data, which in most cases is not an issue, but I think we have to be aware of some of the risks and some of the challenges around that. And of course, economic growth and innovation. 25 years ago, Europe was the center of tech innovation with companies like Nokia, Ericsson, SAP. But since then, that's changed dramatically. And now the center of innovation, of course, is largely in the US and particularly in Silicon Valley. Okay, this is the VMware Sovereign Cloud. So jurisdictional control, sovereignty, data access. I'm not going to go through all of them because you've heard them all day long. But this is what VMware and Broadcom have been doing for 20 to 25 years, is building these solutions. So we know a few things about it. And that's really it for me. A little bit about repatriation. We're seeing some of that already. A lot of our partners, our cloud partners, are seeing people moving workloads out of public cloud. We actually published a report on this just a few days ago. I don't have the link on there, unfortunately, because it was very recently, but we did quite a bit of research, and there's a lot of now partners and customers seeing workloads being returned from public cloud, partly for the reasons we've been here talking about today, partly for other reasons like cost, etc. as well. And that's it. That's it for me, and I can only thank you, and thank you again for spending the day here with us and the time here with us. It has been the best event that we've had. This is our third one here in this venue. This was actually sold out. We had to stop registrations last week, as some of you know. Obviously, we had a little bit of attrition in the afternoon. Always happens with people going for flights and the pub and other things. So really, really appreciate you stayed for the entire day. Go, please, and enjoy your drink. Is no other closing from Emma? No? Okay. Thanks very much indeed.